Everyone's talking about AI agents. Almost no one's talking about who stops them becoming expensive theatre. If nobody owns routing, budgets, approvals, and traceability, you don't have an agentic system. You have living spaghetti with access to your credit card. So I want to imagine where this idea leads, what orchestration engineering is, what the job might actually be, why teams might need it, and why some engineers might want to grow into it. In plain English, if we're building agentic swarms, how do we design how humans, agents, models, and tools work together inside a modern system of work? And who makes that design? I've been thinking about this because when I build agentic swarms, I notice I'm the orchestration layer. I'm the one managing the communication between agents. I'm the one deciding which model should do which job. I'm the one deciding which part should stay local, which part should run in the cloud, which agent should touch which tool, and where the guardrails need to be. But the interesting question isn't, can I get a good answer out of an agent? It's, how do I design the system so the whole loop works and flows sensibly? In my earlier video about agentic swarm, I said it feels a bit like conducting an orchestra, and I think that's still the right image. You're not asking for output, you're deciding who comes in and when, who stays quiet, who gets the attention of those buying the tickets, and who's playing a supporting role. And you make sure the whole piece still sounds coherent when there are unpredictable human elements in the ensemble. That's why I think this isn't prompt engineering with a shinier title. Prompt engineering, at least in the narrow sense people often mean, is about how to get a better output from a model or agent. Orchestration engineering is about the system around the output. It's closer to platform engineering, closer to workflow design, closer to thinking about the branching strategies, pipelines, environments, permissions, and operational flow. In plain English, prompting is about what one agent says or does. Orchestration is about how the whole team works. And when I say team, I do mean agents, but I also mean humans. Because one of the most important things here is that the problem isn't just agent orchestration, it's human and agent orchestration. That's an important distinction because it's one thing to think about a clever swarm for a demo. It's another thing to make it work when multiple real people need to collaborate around it, update the same spec, stay aligned across strands of work, avoid Git conflicts, and understand what parts of the workflow are accountable to whom. That, to me, is where orchestration engineering starts sounding less like hype and more like delivery design. Because failure modes are already visible. You can use the wrong model for the wrong job. You can burn expensive reasoning on something that's basically just passing information from one stage to another. You can route genuinely hard work to a weak model and get confident rubbish back. You can create chains of agent output that look productive but never become a useful input to the next step. You can also create security and governance problems very quickly if no one's thought clearly about which agent is allowed to touch what data or which tool. That's why I think the risk isn't just bad prompts, it's badly designed systems of work. Teams experimenting with agentic delivery are discovering coordination problems that don't fit inside the old role boundaries. And that presents an opportunity for engineers. When I moved from a sysadmin role into one where I could use DevOps practices, it was absolutely magical. I could build the scripts and pipelines and environments, and then out of nowhere, you could make a system magically appear reliably with a press of a button. If someone wanted a new environment for a product, I no longer had to get on the phone and order the equipment, drag it into the server room, wire it up, and start building it by hand. I could just wave a magic wand, and within a couple of minutes, you had the thing spinning up and deploying and being tested automatically. It was amazing. And this feels a bit like that. Only now you're not spinning up infrastructure and deploying. You're spinning up temporary teams for intellectual work. A planner, a reviewer, a critic, a researcher, a formatter, a test runner, a governance check, all working inside a loop that still makes sense to the humans around it. That's interesting work. It's systems work and it's leverage, but it's only valuable if it's not theatre. The key responsibility is deciding when the swarm is actually earning its keep and when a simpler architecture would do the job better. So metrics are important, but it's more than measuring throughput. Sometimes the clever thing isn't more agents. Sometimes the clever thing is one decent agent, one deterministic workflow, and one clear human checkpoint. In plain English, good orchestration isn't about making the human in the loop disappear completely, or, as I like to say, expanding the loop and making the human intervention minimal. It's about deciding which tasks stay human, which can be delegated, which need approval, which need traceability, which need cost controls, which models are required for each agentic step, and which shouldn't happen at all because the work itself is badly defined. Because that last point matters loads. Sometimes the biggest inefficiency is a weak product definition, or bad constraints, or unclear ownership, or a team using AI to accelerate work that wasn't even needed. That strengthens the case for orchestration thinking, because somebody needs to ensure those decisions are being made inside or at the start of the workflow rather than ignored outside it. And this matters to CTOs because if you're building AI now, the question isn't which model should we use, the question is who is actually responsible for how work moves through this mixed human agent system. Who owns the routing? Who owns the contracts between stages? Who owns the approvals, the budgets? Who owns the traces when something goes wrong? So if I were talking to technology leaders directly, the message would be this. This is the bleeding edge, but it's probably time to stop assuming your future team looks like a slightly modified agile team with a few AI tools bolted on. You may need to think much more carefully about the task, the workflow, the human checkpoints, the agent capabilities, the shared spec, and the control layer between them. And if that capability is real in your organization, give it real value. Because not all games look like shipped features. Sometimes they come as a system that just works better. Because if you really follow that through, you're thinking about which agents are used, which models are used, what stays local, what goes to the cloud, where the security boundaries sit, how permissions are managed, how handoffs happen, how costs are controlled, and how humans stay meaningfully in the loop. Can't any T-shaped engineer do that? Yes. Because although I love the magic and I'm ready for the magic, the strongest version of this idea isn't mystical. It's that a mixed human agent system needs grown up engineering. They need people who can think in flows, constraints, trade offs, interfaces, safety, and accountability. And there's a skeptical version of this argument that's worth taking seriously. Maybe orchestration engineering isn't a thing, it isn't a role. Maybe this is just the next maturity layer of strong platform engineers, staff engineers, systems people, and technical leaders. I think that's a fair challenge. And isn't this harness engineering? Well, there's overlap, and harness engineering focuses on the controls and feedback systems around AI agents, especially in coding and production contexts. But I'm using orchestration engineering more broadly to describe how work flows across humans, agents, models, tools, approvals, and governance. The ideas might converge or sit alongside each other, and much like they do in platform engineering, site reliability engineering, and DevOps engineering, if that's even a thing. Look, I don't have a crystal ball, or at least I don't have one that tells the future, or I don't have one that tells the future when I use it anyway. So I don't know if an orchestration engineer is going to be a real role, but it doesn't really matter because the responsibilities are still here. Someone has to design, govern, and continuously improve how humans, agents, models, and tools work together. Orchestration engineering may not become a formal title, but the capability is real. So, are we going to see the rise of orchestration engineering? Let me know in the comments, even if you disagree, especially if you disagree. And while you're here, please give that like button a quick poke. This is a much bigger topic than one video, so I'll be exploring it in more detail. Subscribe if you want to hear more, because I think orchestration engineering is so important that it's going to need its own role. And that's not just because I like the sound of that role, even though I do. Orchestration engineering sounds quite good. But because the real value from AI won't come from isolated flashes of output. It'll come from designing systems of work that are coherent, accountable, secure, and economically sane. So whether it's a formal title or not, the capability is already important. Because somebody needs to decide how humans, agents, models, and tools actually work together in production. And somebody needs to make sure that that system actually deserves to exist. That, to me, is the shift. Less fascination with the demo, more the responsibility for the loop. Less obsession on whether you can get an agent to do something clever, and more on the focus of whether the whole system helps a real team deliver better outcomes. If that's where engineering is heading, then orchestration may turn out to be one of the most valuable forms of engineering judgment in the next few years. Not glamorous, not mystical, maybe a bit magical, but deeply useful. And that's usually where the real leverage is. If you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, please check out my others, hit the like button and subscribe. So that's all for now. See you next time. Goodbye.